So apparently Jim Henson was involved in a lot more than just Muppet productions. In fact, his company was involved in quite a few movies and TV shows throughout the 80s and 90s, and he had his own passion projects himself. Many fans would consider his magnum opus to be The Dark Crystal, which featured no human actors, created entirely with advanced puppetry, and a mythology that people still love to this very day. But does it still hold up? Did it ever hold up to begin with? Well, I've never actually seen it before this review, so it's about time I give this classic a look.
The Dark Crystal was released in 1982, directed by Jim Henson and Frank Oz, common collaborators from previous Henson productions, most notably The Muppets. This movie is probably Henson's biggest groundbreaking achievement in film. Whereas The Muppet Movie proved his worth, The Dark Crystal solidified his craftsmanship. You can just sense the detail in every frame of this movie, to the characters, the sets, and the effects. They just really don't make movies like this anymore, and it's crazy to think that this was all done in 1982, with most of it still holding up today. I rarely am ever thinking about where the hands or strings are. I'm always just sucked into this environment that's odd, creepy, and original. After waiting years to watch this, I can finally understand why so many people have come to appreciate it as Henson's masterpiece. It has tons of backstory, bringing you into a world that's all its own, and featuring characters and words that help to make the scenery become engaging. I could watch these Skeksis move around all day, and there's just something that's so believable about it all, and I really wish this was an art form that was still being used today. It pops up in bigger budget movies here and there, but for the most part, the computer is typically being used as the tool of choice for special effects, which is fine when you have something nearly impossible to put on camera that needs to look real, but come on, everything in this movie was close to impossible, yet they did it. And this was in 1982, puppetry improved even further after this, so imagine if they kept developing the technology today. They're still pushing the boundaries in some areas, so I think it's about time we try our best to bring mythical or original creatures to life with as much practical effects as possible, because they just always look more appealing and age better. So with all this praise, you probably think I love this movie, right? Well, okay, I appreciate it, and Jim Henson is an idol of mine. I can't really run around criticizing anything he did, because even his least popular projects brought some kind of advancement to the table. He always pushed his art forward, even if it was something that didn't work on a narrative or character level. With The Dark Crystal, it's a story that takes place thousands of years after an event where the powerful crystal cracked, which brought about two races, the Skeksis, who use the power of the crystal for themselves, which is causing the world to fall apart, and leaving only their terror to rule. The Mystics are the other race, who are just these low-key wizards who are really super slow walkers. The Mystics take in a Gelfling named Jen, who is told to go on the journey to find the crystal shard, which can heal the bigger crystal, therefore save the universe before the Great Conjunction, which will bring permanent power to the Skeksis. So there's a bit of a world-saving plot here, a prophecy, and a chosen one. It's all kinds of stuff you've seen before in the likes of The Hero's Journey, or Lord of the Rings, or Star Wars. So it's not really new territory, but it's to be expected from the fantasy genre. Usually a movie like this relies on its original mythology and characters to stick out from the rest. But in the case of The Dark Crystal, I don't really know if it succeeds in either. The movie has a lot of exposition right off the bat, which isn't unusual for this type of film. I've seen it done before in many different stories, and it usually just sets things up for the main feature, which usually plays out like a final episode of a great saga. However, the exposition can feel a bit empty at times, because I don't really have a full grasp of what's happening, unless I do prior research or make clever assumptions. I understand that there's a cult following for this movie, which I can assume is because the fans have dug into this world before, but for me, I just felt that things were too rushed at the beginning and doesn't really get me into the story. Then we are introduced to Jen, who looks like a strange elf humanoid that's meant to be the hero of this adventure. The only problem is, he doesn't really do much to keep me invested. He talks in a monotone, almost bored voice, and when the journey begins, he gets to the final destination in what feels like 10 minutes. It doesn't really feel like a big, sprawling epic when he simply has to go down the road road to save the universe. It doesn't really have any weight to it. We never really learned too much about this character, only that his family and village had previously been destroyed, much like the other Gelfling character we meet, Kira. She lives with a family of podlings, and they run into all kinds of different things along with her pet, Fizzgig. So we see lots of designs and backgrounds, but once again, as visually pleasing as this movie is, I can't really get too invested in the story. It's all laying in the hands of these two characters whose arcs are pretty minimal, and personalities that have almost no development. They seem like stand-ins for this amazing world that should have an interesting plot, but you really just don't feel the size of its importance. There's so much I still love though. I do like the Mystics and the Skeksis especially. This Chamberlain character has his own arc going on, and he's just so scummy, sneaky, and gross. They all are. These are horrific but great designs, and it succeeds in Henson's need to put something that was slightly frightening on the screen. I really do like the trippy ending, even if it leads to more exposition and a more than convenient resurrection, and the music is memorable. The main theme is something that I'd hum for days. It feels reminiscent of the fantasy genre in general, but feels completely original on its own. I like a lot of these sets, I like the crazy different characters that show up, I like when they take the essence from these podling characters, it just looks creepy as hell. Like a lot of these types of movies, it has a lot to work with, but can never seem to grow past the chosen one plot. With this world, I was really hoping they would have done something a little different that would take advantage of the material around them, but it really does feel like their minds were entirely focused on making the effects look good, which isn't bad. This movie is all about the visuals, and there's nothing wrong with having a movie like that.
So, I don't love this movie, but I still dig the visuals and the mythology. I just really wish they'd go back to this art form in some kind of capacity. And hey, maybe even touch upon this story, dig into that exposition a little more, maybe expand upon it, maybe make it a little more detailed, maybe make it into a series. But, you know, puppetry is mostly dead at this point, and The Dark Crystal didn't really do that well financially, so I kind of doubt they'll ever do any kind of sequel or prequel or anything to continue the story. I love puppets.
Thanks to NolanCho for this Patreon request, and thanks to all my Patreon supporters. For only $7, you can get your own monthly movie review. Ask me to review anything I haven't already. There's also other perks like blogs, exclusive videos, and early access. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and thanks so much for watching this video.